called Hampstead Heath, which is just because we struggle to connect or bond, see how you reacted. And what I found with cultists is that it's all about energy manipulation, and this inculcated or initiated had the misfortune of meeting and dealing with, and I won't get into too much detail. She was a producer for Endemol Productions. Now, Endemol is the company that produces Big Brother. So to give you the link there, now to be a producer of a show like this, she must obviously be, I don't know, indoctrinated or inculcated or initiated into something. Her husband was, or partner, I'm not sure if they were married, was a banker. And she's the kind of person who would call you up and cause drama because she liked to get that energetic suction of you. And afterwards she would say, oh, don't worry, I'm only joking. I just kind of want to see how you reacted. And what I found with cultists is that it's all about energy manipulation. And this is the kind of thing they'll do. They'll torture people to watch them suffer. And this is what I very much felt was happening with this woman. And this is one of the first sort of friends, acquaintances that we had there. We started to notice this pattern in the people that lived around there, which is very odd. And, you know, having traveled a lot, having backpacked through Europe and the Mediterranean, I made friends pretty easily. And all the time we lived there, we actually have no friends, people that we now know from that period of time, from that 5-year period of time, because we struggled to connect or bond. There seemed to be a very distinctive cliques within the Hampstead Highgate area, which also has a large proportion of Jewish people that live there. In fact, Golders Green is on the other side of Hampstead Heath. I said it's like a triangle, it's like three-sided, but Golders Green is the known Jewish area of Hampstead. And we used to go walking on this heath all the time for fitness, and we sometimes would come across some very secluded areas, very secluded, and the only way I can describe what we found there was kind of like stone circles, stones placed in circles, twigs placed like in huts, and looked like there had been something going on, some kind of rituals or ceremonies. There were stone altars as well, just like in the middle of these circles. And very, not knowing what I know now, back then, we're talking around a period of between 2002 till about 2007. I knew even then that there was something. I used to say, this is which I used to joke with my husband, I said, this is witchcraft and stuff that's going on here, because just from what I'd seen in films, you know, I could pretty much gather this is which I used to joke with my husband, I said, this is witchcraft and stuff that's going on here, because just from what I'd seen in films, you know, I could pretty much gather this is something else that we know, because just from what I'd seen in films, I could pretty much gather this is something else that we don't know what this really is all about. But what's interesting is on Hampstead Heath, you also have something called Kenwood House, and a number of very, what I'd call elitist type old style Victorian houses and mansions and castles surrounding this heath, okay? George Michael has a home right on the edge of the heath. There's a number of very famous television and music industry folk who have homes in this area, and in these Gothic, and I must say, one of the most amazing things about Hampstead is it has some of the most beautiful houses in London, a lot of very Gothic looking castle type things, turrets, and you can be sure anything that's kind of got that kind of Illuminati architecture most likely has some form of ritualized something going on in it. One of the other things which is very interesting to note, of course, as I said, Highgate is on the other side. You have Highgate Cemetery. Now, the road that connects Hampstead to Highgate around the top of the heath has a pub on it called the Spaniards Inn. And this is extremely important because it's one of the oldest pubs in London. The food there is really excellent. But why it is interesting is because this is the place where Abraham Stoker, better known as Bram Stoker, Freemason, wrote his book Dracula. And he based a large proportion of the events in Highgate Cemetery. Now, if you go down the road further to go down Swain's Lane towards Highgate Cemetery, this is no ordinary cemetery. It's probably one of the creepiest places I've ever seen. In fact, I believe it's one of the most haunted places in London.
Hello, this is Vic. Welcome to my channel and thank you for viewing my videos. Today I'm in the beautiful and spectacular city of London here in England, and I'm visiting the most historic site, the most historic cemetery in London. This is Highgate Cemetery. In this particular documentary, we're going to walk around this place and we're going to identify and visit each historic tomb, memorial, and monument in this vast place. I will tell you what each person did in order to become famous. Were they a TV presenter, a singer, an author, or a war hero? We'll see. I will also tell you when they lived. This is Vic. Let's go for a wonderful walk on a very cold Sunday morning. Let's do it. Pocklington, who lived between 1860 and 1935. Dalziel of Wooler, political activist and philosopher, born in 1818 and died in 1883. Thousands of people visit this tomb and memorial every year. You can see that they place candles and flowers around. And here's one of the most beautiful and graphic memorials you will find here at Highgate. This is the tomb of Harry Thornton, a very famous pianist. And here is, without a doubt, one of the most beautiful monuments and tombstones here at Highgate. This is of the Anglo-French monuments and pieces of art here at Highgate. This is the grave of Anna Mahler. Train robbery of 1963. Newman, who lived between 1857 and 1916. He was from South Africa. He became very wealthy. Of Philip Gould, Gould, a baron. Born in 1950, he died in 2011. He was a political advisor and also the creator of the New Labour movement. The tomb of Claudia Jones from Trinidad, born in 1915 and died in 1964. A political activist, and she's the one that founded the Notting Hill Festival here in London, one of the most popular festivals that takes place every year. And here's the tomb of John Henderson Smith, who lived between 1826 and 1904. McLaren, who lived between 1946 and 2000. In the American Civil War, he was born in 1836, died in 1914. And here's the purple marble memorial for Isaac Zachary, who was born in 1823 and died in 1900. Now this person was a doctor, one of Abraham Lincoln's doctors in the US. He was also a Mason, and he established the Masonic Order of the Secret Monitor within the British Empire. And this here is the tombstone of Anthony Schaeffer, a very famous author. He lived between 1926. Field Charles Hucks, Hucks, an aviation pioneer, born. And here's the tombstone for Sergeant Robert Grant, born in 1837. He died in 1867. A very distinguished military career. He was awarded the Victoria Cross during the Indian Rebellion of 1857. And here's the tomb of Francis Elgar, born in 1845 and he died in 1909. He was the first professor of naval architecture. And here's the memorial to Martin Kolnagyi, who lived between 1821 and 1908. He became famous from collecting pictures and also as a dealer of pictures as well. And this tombstone that you see here, right in the middle of the frame, is of an American citizen by the name of Ernest Fenolosa. He was born in 1853, died in 1908. And he was a very famous art historian. He specialized in Japanese art. Very difficult to find his tombstone here at Highgate. And here's a tombstone of Felix Topolsky, born in Poland in 1907 and died in 1989 here in the United Kingdom, a famous painter. And here's a tombstone of Max Wall, a famous comedian and actor here in the... Well, hello once again, and I hope you enjoyed what you saw from Highgate Cemetery. We visited the most important historic sites of this spectacular place here in London. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe. Thank you for joining me.
This is no ordinary cemetery. It's probably one of the creepiest places I've ever seen. In fact, I believe it's one of the most haunted places in London. If you're into that sort of thing, you can look it up on a website. It's rated as one of the top 10 most haunted places in London. I've heard all sorts of stories from eyewitnesses about strange creatures that frequent that place. Everything from vampiric-looking creatures to grey creatures to reptilian-looking creatures. In fact, there's a part of the cemetery that's closed off that has pyramids, and I'm absolutely positive, and I have heard stories that there are rituals that go on underground, and these pyramids in the closed off part of the cemetery are actually where people enter into these tombs where they're having these rituals. Now, my honest belief here is, Alfred, is yes, it's a terrible thing what's happened with the schools, and I don't think that it's made up. What I think is this is just what is happening. The same thing with Jimmy Savile, the same thing with all those people who have now been thrown to the public. This is just a distraction from
England is home to the world's most beautiful Victorian cemeteries, known as the Magnificent Seven. But by the mid-1900s, into absolute ruin, and one in particular was the site of one of the oddest examples of mass hysteria the world has seen. On Friday the 13th, in 1970, this cemetery was overrun as teenagers carrying wooden stakes and crucifixes climbed into the cemetery ready to stake a vampire. I am talking about Highgate Cemetery. Fire panic. Folklorists refer to something called legend tripping. It's basically when teenagers tell each other a story about a scary or haunted place, and then in telling the story, create the framework for a dare. That house is haunted. I bet you wouldn't go inside. Legend tripping can be kind of self-reinforcing. So, if one group of teenagers goes to a cemetery and it draws a giant pentagram, the next group of teenagers who comes is gonna be like, oh my God. But there's another ingredient that can make this even more extreme. And that's when the press gets involved. It becomes a kind of megaphone on local adolescent legend tripping.
Now, if you go down the road further go down Swain's Lane, oldest pubs in London. The food there is really excellent. But why it is interesting is because this is the place where Abraham Stoker, better known as Bram Stoker, Freemason, wrote his book Dracula. And he based a large proportion of the events in Highgate Cemetery.
Would make this a special and amazing case, and that was the dueling magicians. David Farrant stepped to the stage to say that he thought there might be some kind of evil presence, a specter, a modern-day Van Helsing as the press would frame him. A local newspaper published this story. Does a vampire haunt Highgate Cemetery? And into the frame stepped another magician, Sean Manchester. He was to play David Farrant's foil, and he said, yes, not only does a vampire haunt Highgate Cemetery, but it's the vampire of a Bohemian prince who is brought here by Satanists to be brought back to life. This created an incredible press story. It just built, and more kids were showing up. Weird things were starting to actually happen. Bodies were getting dug up. Mausoleums were being broken into. But on Friday the 13th in 1970, it reached a crescendo because a local TV station decided to interview both David Farrant and Sean Manchester about the Highgate vampire. And by that evening, the Highgate Cemetery was overrun by a mob of vampire hunting teenagers. This would continue for years. Things got pretty out of hand. Corpses were being dug up and staked through the heart. A headless body was found sitting in a nearby car. A teenager found a corpse burnt to a crisp line in this cemetery. It shows you that it doesn't take that much to cause this kind of hysteria. All you need is some teenagers legend tripping, some newspapers willing to publish those accounts as if they were legitimate, and two magicians to step in and say, I'm the one that's here to kill this vampire. Subscribe.
Now, if you go down the road further go down Swain's Lane towards Highgate Cemetery, this is no ordinary cemetery. It's probably one of the creepiest places I've ever seen. In fact, I believe it's one of the most haunted places in London. If you're into that sort of thing, you can look it up on a website. It's rated as one of the top 10 most haunted places in London. I've heard all sorts of stories from eyewitnesses about strange creatures that frequent that place. Everything from vampiric-looking creatures to grey creatures to reptilian-looking creatures. In fact, there's a part of the cemetery that's closed off that has pyramids, and I'm absolutely positive, and I have heard stories that there are rituals that go on underground, and these pyramids in the closed off part of the cemetery are actually where people enter into these tombs where they're having these rituals. Now, my honest belief here this is a terrible thing what's happened with the schools, and I don't think that it's made up. What I think is this is just what is happening. The same thing with Jimmy Savile, the same thing with all those people who have now been thrown to the public. This is just a distraction from the real darkness and evilness that's going on there, and the real kingpin of all of this. That school is not the only school where it's going on. Christchurch is not the only church where that's going on. There's a number of churches in the Hampstead area where I'm absolutely convinced that all this sort of stuff is going on. The Roslyn Hill Church, which has been renovated for years, and it stands right next to the Hampstead Welfare Hospital. I remember one day walking back from the tube station and walking past the church, and they've been renovating it for years. And suddenly they had all these white screens all the way around the church, and what looked like guys in forensic masks. You know, they had covers on their face. I thought, did they find toxic waste or something there? And then I spoke to one of the nurses at the hospital, and she said that they actually found bodies under the church that had, you know, ritualistically been killed, children, all sorts. And, you know, when they'd been renovating the church, they'd obviously uncovered this big pile of bodies. And there's a lot of strange deaths that happen in Hampstead. For example, as I said, I lived at number 4A, Downshire Hill, just slightly further down at number 8 when I was living there. And this is a big mansion of a house, is number 8. There was a man who lived there who was killed. And when we asked how he was killed, and there was a police officer standing outside, he wasn't saying anything, but the neighbors were saying he was tortured to death in his own home. It's a lot of strange murders. There's always bodies being found on the heath. A very famous Vogue photographer was found in the ladies' swimming pools, I think it was in 2013. And this is a common thing, dog walkers finding bodies all over the heath. It seems to be a dumping ground. So there's something going on there. Whether the school is it or just a symptom of a much bigger problem, this is what I believe, but there is something going on in that place. Oh, there's one more thing that's probably of great interest. And as I said, I lived in Downshire Hill Road, and what I found very interesting, I didn't know what the Freemasons were at the time, but we had a pub on the corner of Downshire Hill Road called the Freemasons' Arms. Now, this place actually had on what looked like the ground level, the top part of the pub, which is all beautiful old English pub, wooden, big fireplaces, really good food. And then there was a downstairs area where there was said to be a 200-year-old skittle alley, which we were never ever able to access. But we had seen people going into the basement part, and I'm absolutely convinced that that was a Freemasons meeting house because it's called the Freemasons' Arms. So there is a lot of very interesting stuff about this area. And I don't think that what's happened at the school is isolated by any measure of means. In fact, I think this coming out is just a symptom of a much bigger problem, and possibly, you know, I know how it has come out. I know the woman who has done all of this expose. I think that the fact that she's still alive and she's able to talk about this is absolutely amazing. But I really don't think this is it. I think it's much deeper than what they're saying. we were never access, but we had seen people going into the basement part, and I'm absolutely convinced that that was a Freemasons meeting house because it's called the Freemasons Arms. So there is a lot of very interesting stuff about this area. And I don't think that what's happened at the school is isolated by any measure of means. In fact, I think this coming out is just a symptom of a much bigger problem, and possibly, you know, I know how it has come out. I know the woman who has done all of this expose. I think that the fact that she's still alive and she's able to talk about this is absolutely amazing. But I really don't think this is it. I think it's much deeper than what they're saying.
Now you've read the document that Anonymous put out, and it's fairly explicit. It says East Finchley swimming pool is amongst other meeting spots for satanic pedophile ring. The members of the ring attend swimming sex sessions, satanic ritual, blood sacrifice. The ritual is performed in an upstairs room in McDonald's on Mondays and Fridays. Do you think that that's credible? That document from what you know from that area?
Well, here's something that I found very ironic. That's the Jewish belt, Hampstead, Highgate, Golders Green, the Jewish belt. It was actually a Jewish man who told me that they take the bodies of children that they've killed in their Talmudic rituals and they put them into McDonald's burgers. Isn't it ironic now all of a sudden that McDonald's is playing a part in this? Okay, so I don't think there's. It was actually a Jewish man who told me that they take the bodies of children that they've killed in their Talmudic rituals and they put them into McDonald's burgers. Well, here's something that I found very ironic. That's the Jewish belt, Hampstead, Highgate, Golders Green, the Jewish belt. It was actually a Jewish man who told me that they take the bodies of children that they've killed in their Talmudic rituals and they put them into McDonald's burgers. Isn't it ironic now all of a sudden that McDonald's is playing a part in this? Okay, so I don't think there's any coincidence there. There is another very interesting thing which I think for me is a piece de resistance about what Hampstead Heath really is. There's a place on Hampstead Heath called Parliament Hill, and basically Parliament Hill overlooks south over London, and you can see all the way to Crystal Palace from Parliament Hill. It's called Parliament Hill because this is where they used to hold Parliament. Now, you've done a lot of research, Alfred. You know, on hills, this is where it used to be where sacred sites of ritual were, and it's been proven as well that governments and ruling people used to meet at these ritual sacred sites, and this is where parliaments and stuff were formed. And I actually don't think that Parliament Hill is a natural hill. I think it's a burial mound because there's tons of these things all over, the UK. All sorts of these things. Anywhere you find crop circles and stone circles, you'll find these sort of like Salisbury Mound. And I think this could be one of these ritualistic burial mounds. If not, it certainly has been used for all sorts of rituals and things in the past because all these sort of things were always done on the top of hills. They're believed to be close to the heavens or God or whatever it was. But it is probably one of the focal points of this heath is this massive hill which overlooks the whole of London. And the fact that it's called Parliament Hill alludes exactly to its function, what it became, what it evolved from. And for me, it says a lot about what that area is actually really all about.
Right, right. You know, at our news portal, we get comments on, for example, the release of the anonymous document by people that will say, "Oh, this is false. This is absolutely false. This is not occurring. If this were occurring, the parents would be in front of the school. They would be protesting. The medical authorities would have examined the children medically to determine if their, you know, physical parts had been abused or disturbed." What is your assessment as to people's letters like this?
Well, to be honest with you, in an ideal world, we'd like to believe that when there is an injustice, that there will be those who will do the right things, do the examinations, take the evidence and follow through on it. You know, this is how we would like to believe the world works. But it doesn't work that way often. If it did, you and I wouldn't be doing what we do. Okay? Simple fact is that you know that in order to be in a position of power, there has to be a certain amount of corruptibility about you. Otherwise, you just don't get there. Whatever the corruptibility examinations, take the evidence and follow through on it. You know, this is how we would like to believe the world works. But it doesn't work that way often. If it did, you and I wouldn't be doing what we do. Okay? Simple fact is that you know that in order to be in a position of power, there has to be a certain amount of corruptibility about you. Otherwise, you just don't get there. In a position of power, there has to be a certain amount of corruptibility about you. Otherwise, you just don't get there. Whatever the corruptibility is, whatever that fallible or that you know, flaw is that they hook into, whether it be, you know, you have a penchant for fiddling with little kiddies, or you know, perhaps you like a bit of crack cocaine, or whatever it is, they will find what it is, and that's what they hook into. Perhaps, you know, you have an ego and you like money and women, and they will find that thing, and that is what they will play to manipulate you and get you to do what they need to do and manipulate you into those positions of power, and you just don't get there unless you're playing that game. So yes, all those authorities are supposed to come and help. It would be nice. But let me tell you, I lived in London, and I sued 3 different companies for what I believe was various degrees of sexual harassment. And every time I lost. And then I actually spoke to someone who had been doing these kind of claims for a long time, and she said only 3% of all women who put sexual harassment claims in the workplace forward to the employment tribunals actually come out, actually come out having it won in their favor. There's more of a chance of them just sweeping it under the carpet and somehow finding a way for it to become socially acceptable. If only 3% of women who bring sexual harassment charges actually win their cases, what does that say about the society we're living in? And that's what I very much found when I was living in London, is that there is a very subtle, subversive attempt to put, to play forward a very underhanded, malicious, malevolent degradation of people. It's almost subversively okay for this kind of thing to go on, because they don't really prosecute it if only 3% of people are having that kind of thing go on. You know, if only 3% of people bringing those cases forward, any kind of sexual harassment case, actually have the claim end in their favor, it means that they're more likely to look the other way for these things. This is the point I'm trying to make. So if that can, I'm just using from my own experience, knowing what I know about the way it works and having lived in London for a long time and seeing the way things go down there, it doesn't surprise me at all, because there is a lot of cognitive dissonance. This stuff is so horrific that I imagine a lot of mummies and daddies in Hampstead don't want to imagine this is going on. You know, the nice ones, that is. And to be honest with you, in the 5 years I lived there, I didn't find any that I liked. it's almost like within certain communities, even within big cities, there is a clique. It's something just beneath the perception of everybody, you know, because it's unspoken of. It's kind of only known between those who are involved in it. And you don't get, you know, in order for them to get away with this, they have to have everybody in the bag, from the police officers to the nurses, the doctors, and and then there's the Royal Free Hospital, which is the hospital in Hampstead. In order for them to get away with this, they have to have everybody in the bag, from the police officers to the nurses, the doctors, and then there's the Royal Free Hospital, which is the hospital in Hampstead. Let me tell you, there is so much that goes on there that is also very questionable. That I think, you know, at some stage we need to bring that into account and into full transparency. But I can only imagine that there would be people working there, the doctors and nurses, who would potentially be called upon to examine these kids, who potentially would also be in on the whole thing, you know? Would also be in on the whole thing. Would also be in on the whole thing. And nurses who would potentially be called upon to examine these kids, who potentially would also be in on the whole thing.
Right, right. So to answer these critics who have been writing in and say that the whole thing is implausible, in the case of Hampstead, where you have the schools, the municipality, in other words, all the facilities, the police, the social services, the health, the hospitals, even the local newspapers and media are captured by this network, then there may well be children who have reported to their parents who have tried to get satisfaction from the school or satisfaction from the police or social services, and they end up losing their child, which is what happened to the mother here. And they didn't have videos that got released to the internet, so we don't know. I.e., what you're validating is that yes, this is going on, and you don't need, and you're showing why it is that parents aren't parading outside. So good. So you've answered these letters of doubters from around the world that are writing in.
Well,
right.
I think that there does actually need to be a few people kicking off, anonymous, anybody based in London, you know, get on the Northern Line, get off at Hampstead, and go out and protest outside the school. Make a noise, make it public. Get into the high street with banners and get in everybody's faces. Hampstead High Street is one of the really poshest high streets. It's beautiful. Right? The shops there are all very expensive, and the restaurants are lovely. And you know, get out there with banners and make a noise about this stuff that's going on in your communities. I think, you know, the only way that we can put pressure on people to do something about it is to raise awareness within the communities. And I'm an optimist. I don't believe that everybody's bad. I believe that there would be some people within Hampstead and Highgate and Golders Green and that whole area who would be absolutely appalled and shocked at what is going on. I don't believe that, you know, these satanic circles are sometimes quite exclusive. They don't include everybody. There are people on the outer who this would mortally offend. And it's to those people we need to reach out and say, you know, don't just go, oh, we'll leave it to somebody else to handle, because those people that you trust to handle it are probably in on it as well. It really is up to the citizens to get out there and make a noise and bring awareness to this. I mean, this is an amazing whistleblower moment about the sort of thing that's going on. And I'm sure that Hampstead is not the only place in London that this sort of thing is happening.
Right. And so how can people that are interested in following you and your news and your perspective, how can they get in touch with you and watch your news?
Well, I don't really get in front of the camera too much these days, Alfred. I only really do it for good friends like you when I feel there's important things to be shared. At the moment, I'm just behind the scenes producing CCN and creating a platform for everybody else. And but if people do want to get in touch and they do have information, you know, they're always welcome to get in touch with us, ccn@unseen.is, and you know, tune into Conscious Consumer Network whenever you're not watching Alfred's show.
Thank you, thank you. Well, good. I'm very, very glad that you were able to come to take time and come forward and share with us this story. And I really also want to commend you for founding CCN.